not just as a disembodied voice, but it's nice to see you. So we start with a blessing for studying Torah. It's always a blessing to study with you, and please join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, to be engaged in the study of Torah. Amen. So, oh my God, please turn on your cameras. It's really more fun for everybody. This week's Torah portion is called Chayei Sara. And Chayei comes from Chaim, life, the life of Sarah. And it starts out with Sarah dying. That's the first section, and Sarah died. So why would they call this Parsha Chayei Sara is a question that, I don't even have an answer to, that why the rabbis decided to call this the life of Sarah, and it starts with her death. But what we can do, take a moment and review the life of Sarah. What do we know about Sarah's life? It's pretty well documented. There's tons of narrative about Sarah, her story. So let's just share with me, what do we know about Sarah? Let's say this was our eulogy for Sarah. What would we say? What about her do we know? Please tell me, because I already know. Yes, Cindy.
Well, I think her beauty is discussed a lot, especially when they go down to Egypt, even though I think she's 63 or something when they go down, but she's still beautiful. But the thing that really strikes me is, as I guess a role model, her cruelness to Hagar, even though she asked Hagar to get pregnant with her husband. And then when she's able to have a child, she turns on them and is quite cruel to her.
Okay, so she had flaws. She was cruel to Hagar. Let's remember that Hagar was cruel to her as well. So it went both ways. But yes, she didn't rise above, what we would like. Okay, what else do we know about her? What else do we know about Sarah? Susan. Kasim Asma, yeah. Kasim. Unmute.
Yeah, she had a son. That's important.
She had a son that she adored.
Yes, and he became the patriarch, which was good. Let me think. What else do we know?
What else do we know about Sarah? Miriam, unmute yourself. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry that took so long. We know about her that when the three angels came to the tent and they said, next year at this time, you will have a child. And she was sort of standing in the tent where they couldn't see her. And she laughed. That. Yes. And I love the expression that she said. I remember it. I'm going to say it in Hebrew. Acharei beloti haitali edna. It was a question. After I am an old woman and I have withered, finished the way of women, b'darchei nashim, will I then have a child?
Right.
In other words, she was incredulous.
Also, we should remember that she was married to Abraham probably since she was a young girl or young woman, and that at the age of 65, along with her husband, they left their homeland and came to a new place, and that she was a teacher of the women. According to the Midrash, she was the one who taught the women, and he taught the men about, Adonai Eloheinu, about God, about this new concept of a God of the whole world. So she did that. And she had a trauma in Pharaoh. Susan Ehrlich, yeah?
Yeah, some of the good things about Sarah. I don't want to think, she had faults, but it shouldn't be a cancel culture, because at the same time, she sacrificed herself in many ways. For her husband's benefit, when she agreed twice to be recognized as his sister rather than his wife.
Yeah.
Even with Hagar, I mean, that takes something to have a surrogate mother. And then she wanted to protect, not only did she love her son, she wanted to protect him from Ishmael's playing with him. Ishmael was 14 or 17, actually, and playing with a little kid. And there are some sexual connotations in that. So she was protective of her son. And she also was a heroine because she understood her role as a monotheist and of communicating monotheistic values to others as well. So I think she's certainly heroic.
She's heroic. And then, according to the Midrash, this is not in the text, why did Sarah die and when did she die?
She died, learned about the Akedah,
Yeah.
the sacrifice her son.
Right. So they say when she heard that her husband
Had a heart attack.
was going to sacrifice her son because God had called him to do that, she had a heart attack and died. And I read in one midrash that the sounds of the shofar, the different calls, are the different cries of her wailing. The Ketukia is like, no, and then no, like that. So that was one of the interesting interpretations of the sounds of the shofar being connected to the Akedah, because that's what Abraham ends up taking a ram in place of his son, and the shofar sort of is sourced to that experience.
I love that.
So Sarah had I would say a real life, a life of pain, a life of joy, a life of happiness, a life of, getting things, a life of losing things. So she sort of models a human being, who did her best, who was terribly hurt by Hagar and overreacted, some would say, or maybe not, but because God said that Abraham should listen to her. And so it's interesting now, what we're going to look at is Abraham's response to the loss of Sarah. And I'm going to share some text with you, and we're going to go back and forth because, I don't know why this is, here it is. Okay, share. Where are people? Okay. Hold on. I actually copied the whole, we're not going to get the whole chapter. Parshat, it's a shame. Okay, so Sarah, I have the Hebrew in case we need to, look at it, but Sarah, Vayehi Chayei Sarah, and it was the life of Sarah's lifetime, but the span of Sarah's life came to 127 years. So she lived to be 127 years old. She died in Kiryat Arba, which still exists in Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her. So he was heartbroken. Then Abraham rose from beside his dead and spoke to the Hittites, saying, I am a resident alien among you. Sell me a burial site among you that I may remove my dead for burial. And the Hittites said, Here, my Lord, you are the elect of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold his burial place from you for burying your dead. And then Abraham bowed low to the people of the land. And he said, If it is your wish that I remove my dead for burial, you must intercede with me for Ephron, son of Zohar. Anyway, sell me land for full price. They offered it, take it free. And he says, no, sell me the land for full price. Okay, there's some really interesting things to look at. First of all, okay, he grieved. So it doesn't say how long, but already we see bewailing and grieving. Later on, people will grieve for Aaron. They'll grieve for Moses for a month. Actually, they grieve for Aaron for a month. And that's when we learn about Shloshim, that the 30 days of grieving. But he cries. He's all alone now. If you look at the story, ever since the Akedah, it doesn't mention Isaac grieving. Why? Where's Isaac? Like Abraham is grieving and there's no mention of Isaac grieving. Why would that be? Do anybody have any ideas? Cindy?
Well, I know the legend is that he went to the yeshiva to go study, but of course, that's only midrash. There weren't yeshivas, but he was probably pissed at his father.
Well, if they
Went
never
off for a while.
spoke again, they never speak again in the text, and they don't even live in the same place. They do not speak again. So they're estranged, it seems. And we don't know. But Abraham goes to, they say something, he says something really interesting. I'm an alien here. I am a foreigner. Alien is not a great translation. Sell me a plot of land so I can bury my wife. Sell me this cave. He actually buys a cave. What does that tell us about? And yet, just talk to me about what you think his status is in this land of Canaan at this point. What's his status, Susan?
It's not a full status. I mean, he's not granted citizenship like the others. And I think his bargaining or wanting to pay for it wants to be assured of his ownership of this and that he is acting righteously in the eyes of the Hittites. So he has to make sure that, all the, what do you call it, dots the I's and crosses the T's as an outsider.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Brad?
Well, the Hittites have received him under the hospitality code that existed throughout the ancient world, and Abraham refuses to buy into it because he doesn't want to be bound in a reciprocal relationship with the Hittites. Because were he to accept the gift of the plot, then he would have to reciprocate in some way. That was all part of the hospitality gift exchange mentality, and he doesn't want to buy into that.
Doesn't want to buy into that. Yes, Miriam?
And this goes against the stigma that Jews are always bargaining, that you never buy anything except wholesale. What? You bought that retail? That kind of thing. We hear it from our own people. And this goes totally against that. He was offered it for free. And he said, no, I will pay full price. He didn't say, oh, thank you for offering it for free, but a discount would be good enough for me. He said, no, I'll pay it full price. Plus another thing, he wanted the people of the Hittites themselves to ask, not he himself, because then if he arrives at a price, people will think that he did something underhandedly or just between himself and the seller. And which maybe does happen a lot in real estate. All kinds of things go on underneath or behind the scenes or whatever you want to call it, or with a handshake. And so he wanted the opposite, either consciously or unconsciously. But he wanted them to bargain, to buy it, and not himself.
I think you're right. Also, though, what's another thing I just want to point out, they say, you are like the elect of God among us. So he already, and in Hebrew, it says, what's the word? Hold on. It says, because it's right here. I don't know. I don't want to take you off. We'll look back in a minute. You are the elect, but he already had a reputation. They wanted to give it to him apparently because, you're chosen by God. You have this whole different way of looking at the world, but he said no. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Lord Sachs, has another very interesting understanding, which I had never heard before. Abraham is now, if she died at 127, he's 137. God has promised him that this land will be his. This is going to be your land 7 times. He's given him 7 blessings. And Abraham still doesn't own 1 foot of land. And so Abraham has decided or understands that to fulfill God's blessings, and I think this is a modern, but I love it, he has to we have to do our part. In other words, this is the first piece of property he's owning in the land of Canaan. It's like, God's not giving it to me. Obviously, I've got to go buy it. I've got to acquire it. So he acquires this cave and this land all around it. He pays full price, but it's his first acquisition in the land. And it's his first step toward fulfilling God's promise, which in a modern way, 1 second, Sue, is like, we're sitting around waiting for God to fulfill the promises, but we have to participate in the promise. He had to go and get the land to take the first step. Sue.
My question is, how did the Hittites know, like Abraham bowed low to them? Because I guess he was in a foreign land and it would be customary for him to show respect. But how did the Hittites know that he was, for lack of a better word, a nobleman, that he should be entitled to the land for free?
Excuse me, Susan, it's in Pasuk Hey. It's in the 5th, the Hebrew is in the 5th sentence.
Okay.
I just want to tell you.
I'm going to look at a second. Well, we just skipped this part in last week. He's already gone to war with kings. He's fought with people. He rescued his son Lot, who was kidnapped. And then they actually offered him things. Then he's known, he's been there since he's 75. He's 137. People know him, and he owns a lot of movable property. He got a lot from the Pharaoh, don't forget, all kinds of riches. It's not, so he's known, yes.
Well, the other thing is, based on what Miriam said in line 5, that but they were not monotheists. So why would they respect him for being a monotheist?
Well, don't you respect people of other religions who are generous and kind and honest in the marketplace? And
well, but I would think in those days, that it's mentioned in the Torah. It must have significance.
I don't think it's that different. I mean, he was the only one. I'm sure they scrutinized him. He's been living there for over 50 years. He has a reputation. He's had 2 sons. People know him. So they know who he is. And obviously he has good relationships with them. Yes, Cindy.
Does this cave still exist in Hebron?
Yes. Oh, yes. The cave of Machpelah. I've visited it. You used to be able to visit it. Absolutely. And it's a very holy place. And supposedly Abraham and Sarah and Rebecca and Isaac and Jacob and Leah are buried there, are in that cave. It's like it was a crypt, and the land around it. I think that I don't think it's to me a problem that he had a reputation, that people knew him, and that he bought this land. And that was the first thing. And that is something, I keep thinking how he thought about Sarah. My poor Sarah, we had all these promises and we never owned any land. We never really saw the fulfillment. I'm going to own where you're buried, Sarah. It's not going to be alien land. At least I'm going to start with that. I'm going to give you something that belongs to us. So, I mean, I'm thinking it from a modern perspective, but I love the Torah, because as you change, the Torah stays the same, but as you change, you see different things in it. I think about reading Madame Bovary when I was 21, and she committed suicide for love. And I thought it was so romantic. And I reread it when I was 40. And I said, what an idiot. What is she doing? Are you crazy? So, it's funny. The same thing. We look at it differently. You think about widowers and wanting to fulfill his wife's dream. That would be the first thing. So what logically would be the next thing Sarah would have wished for that never lived to see? What would be, as a mother, the thing she would have loved to have seen? Susan, you're muted.
She wanted her son to inherit.
Okay.
The younger son.
Hold on, Susan Ehrlich, you're muted.
Yeah, I don't know why I went mute. The marrying, I mean, you want your son to marry and to marry a lovely Rebecca and to have grandchildren.
And to have grandchildren, because the next promise that has yet to be fulfilled, I think Abraham's like, okay, I see that it's up to me now to make the promises happen. I sat around for 65 years. All right. I get the hint.
That's why, I mean, when you bring it up like this, which is great, it's called the life of Sarah, even though she has departed, but she sees her fulfillment with the marriage and then the grandchild that will issue forth from their consummation of it.
Okay. Yes, Brad.
Yeah, I'm stuck in this indebtedness idea. And tell me, what do we know about the Hittites? What happens to them? Are they, do we eventually annihilate the Hittites? Do they ever reappear in the Torah?
I think they reappear in the stories of King David and Saul. And I mean, the Philistines are the ones they're always fighting, but I think Hittites are neighbors. They're neighbors, they're neighboring people that I think there's mainly peace with. I don't recall that it wasn't one of the groups, the Amalekites, the Hittites, the Moabites. These are people they were fighting, but not the Hittites as I know. So,
Looked it up on Wikipedia, and it says that the Hittites were descendants of one of Noah's sons.
Right. Okay, so we were descended from Shem. That's why we're called Semites, by the way, from that.
Oh.
And I don't know, it wasn't Cush, so it had to be the other one, Japheth. It had to be Japheth or Japhet, who would have been their descendant. Okay, so now he decides, okay, that I have a little land, at least to bury my Sarah, and he bought the surrounding, fields. Next thing is I'm going to find a wife for my son, even though my son, we could project, and I are not necessarily getting along, because he doesn't even tell his son he's doing this. He sends his servant to find the wife, and then when the servant brings back the wife, the servant tells him the whole story. So that's very interesting. So now let's look at this part, and now I'm going to ask people to read because, okay. Share. Okay, so now he gets it, and they and then Abraham here in the very bottom here buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And thus, I don't know what this is doing this. Thus, the field with his cave passed from the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site. So that was always there. Okay, now we go to the next part. So who would like to read something? Like a volunteer. Somebody volunteer?
I will.
Okay.
I just want to ask you, this one says Hittites, and that's struck me. Normally we say Hittites.
Who knows the translation?
Okay. Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things.
So physical things, material things he had, but he didn't really have what we all want is a grandchild. Go ahead.
And Abraham said to the senior servant of his household, who was in charge of all that he owned, "Put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife from my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. But you will go to the land of my birth and get a wife for my son Isaac."
Okay, let's stop for a minute. So first of all, in Women's Torah Study, I have talked about this, but why put your hand on my thigh? Why put your hand, Brad?
Well, that's where we get the word testament from, because from the word testicles. That's how you sealed a deal in the ancient world.
put your hand on my genitals, even though all the commentaries say that's what he's really saying, and swear. And there are two interesting interpretations of why. One is that the testicles is the source of life. It's like creation, because life comes from there. So it's holy in a way like God. But the other is that it's also the location of this covenant because of the circumcision. So you're also touching our covenant, my covenant with.
Yeah.
So it's a holy site for both reasons. But it wasn't just the Jews. It was an ancient Near East way of making an oath. So that would be because source of life idea, that's more generic, or maybe men they're called the jewels, my most precious possession. But that is the source of where you put your hand for us. Testimony and testament and all that comes from testes, from putting your hand there. And then he says, don't let my son marry any girl from the Canaanites. Go back to my land. But there are no monotheists back there either. It's not like his family was monotheistic. We can't even say Jewish. It's not Jewish yet, but they didn't follow the one God. So why, let's think about, would he say, don't marry and let him marry a Canaanite? And why would you, and then somebody, if you have your phone on or whatever.
Miriam?
All right, whatever. Okay.
Well,
Okay, so who has an idea of why he would say that? Have a speculation of why he would say not only don't marry, but go home to other not pagans. Okay, Brad?
well, I don't have an idea, but it just confirms this idea, this concept, my concept, that he's refusing to partake in the hospitality code, because under the hospitality code, he would have to reciprocate in some way. And that would mean letting his child marry one of the Canaanites. And he's not buying into that for whatever reason. It's unclear what that reason is, but that is another reason why he insists on buying the land rather than being indebted in some way.
Right, and then they're not going to be his in-laws, are they? They're not going to have any claim on him if
Exactly.
it's Canaanites, even though he's friendly with them and they are neighborly. Also, if you go home and bring a girl back, she's much more under the family control. You know what I mean? And even we can convert her, we can teach her, but she's not under the influence of her pagan family, so in India, even modern Indian people today often get a shidduch or a match from somebody back from India and bring her over, and they don't have that whole relationship with the family sometimes. Yes, Susan and then Cindy.
Yes, I was going to say that, just speculating, but it seems like mishpocha, they're people and even though they're not in that religion yet, I don't know the genetics, but also it's family. And I think that's more comforting than the strangers around you.
Okay, I think that's a good point. Cindy?
Yeah, I was basically going to say that Nahor, although he's deceased, his family is there, and the girl that's chosen is his granddaughter, I think. So it's
his great niece, Abraham's great niece. Right. Okay. So then, all right, so let's go back now to share. And he says that, and then Ellie, well, we think he's Eliezer because later that's the name of his servant is. And he's already having anxiety about this task. So who wants to read about his anxiety and fear that he won't be able to fulfill the task? Somebody else, come on. Volunteer, you're all good readers. Right here, and the servant said to him, right here. Somebody? Okay, Sue.
And the servant said to him, what if the woman does not consent to follow me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to the land from which you came?
Okay, hold
I
on.
can't see the rest.
I know I'm changing it around so you can. Okay.
Abraham answered him, on no account must you take my son back there. Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my native land, who promised me on oath, saying, I will assign this land to your offspring. He will send his angel before you, and you will get a wife for my son from there. And if the woman does not consent to follow you, you shall then be clear of this oath to me, but do not take my son back there. Continue.
Just one more. Yeah.
So the servant put his hand under the thigh of his master Abraham and swore to him as bidden about this matter.
Yeah. Literally, it means bidden. Okay. So it's like Abraham with an exclamation point in the translation. Absolutely do not take him back there. What? No, our promise is here. God's here. And Abraham talks about an angel, which never appears. There's no angel in this story, but he's so confident that things that it will be fulfilled. And yet at the same time, he's making sure it's fulfilled. He's trying to anyway, by sending him back. And if you can't find anyone, then you're, absolved from this oath. But I believe you will find someone there. And of course, he does. Okay. So then, and the test is so interesting. The test that he, has for the girl. He took 10 of his master's camels, set out taking with him all the bounty of his master, and he made his way to Aram Naharaim, the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel down by the well outside the city at evening time, the time when women come out to draw water. So the well is the symbol of love, of where girls and boys would meet every night or every day, shepherds and shepherdesses, and the girls coming out to get water for their families, for their homes. And so he went, it's like the town square or the meeting place. And he said, "Oh Lord, God of my master Abraham," interesting, not his God. Notice that. "Grant me good fortune this day and deal graciously with my master Abraham. Here I stand by the spring as the daughters of the townsmen come out to draw water. Let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink." It's really a pitcher. The word is pitcher. "And who replies, drink, and I will also water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have decreed for your servant Isaac. Thereby shall I know that you have dealt graciously with my master." Okay. So this part of the story is really kind of like Cinderella or like a fairy tale. It's like, he even puts the words that they want. Let her say this, and I will know she's the one. And no sooner is he finished than who comes but Rebecca. And she says exactly what he asked for. This part of the story is very beautiful, but it's about Rebecca, and she's beautiful, and she's a virgin, and she's a young girl. And hold on, let me just. And she's kind, and we have to remember that to water camels, and they've come all the way from like the land of Israel to Iraq, because that's where it is. They were thirsty, so she said, "Oh, let me water all your camels, 10 camels." That must have taken a lot of pulling up a lot of water and whatever. So he's very impressed with her, and I love what he does immediately. Hold on. Share screen. Share screen. Sharing. Let me stop this. Share screen. It's not sharing. Let me try one more time. Hannah, are you there? It's not sharing.
I have a Tanakh if you want me to read it.
Okay, I mean.
Yes, I'm here.
I don't know why it's not sharing my, oh, okay, here it came. I don't know what happened. All right,
There you
so,
go.
all right, so it says here, the maiden was beautiful and a virgin and who had no man had known, very important. She went down and she said, drink. She gave him water, and then she gave camels water, and then he said this. So who would like to read right here where it says, pray tell me? Somebody like to read that? Come on. Oh my God. I'm in the middle of a Zoom call, a class, I can't do. Okay, anybody want to read?
I don't have it. It's not going up.
All right. Pray tell me, he said, whose daughter are you? Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. Now, Nahor and Abraham, by the way, were brothers. So this is his great niece. And she went on, there's plenty of straw and feed at home and also room to spend the night. So, you know what's interesting to me about Rebecca? Okay. If you had a daughter, and she was a teenager, and a strange man came and said, you know, can you help me? Give me some water. Yes. Do you have any room in your house? And I know there's the law of hospitality and everything. Don't you think your daughter would say, let me check with my father or my mother or somebody before saying, oh, we have plenty of room. Come on in. So what are we learning about Rebecca just in this tiny little section already? What kind of character is she? Who is she? Merle. You're muted.
Stranger in.
What? No, you're not. You're not muted. Go ahead.
She's not in a hurry to just let some stranger in, and she doesn't even think about asking her father about it or her family.
She's not in a hurry. She says, come on in right away.
Oh, okay. I was thinking, okay, yeah. I mean, she doesn't. What I'm thinking is that she doesn't really. I mean, yeah. If you're here, you must be okay.
Really?
I mean, if somebody says, here, come on in, do you let somebody just come on into your
Well,
house?
what does it say about Rebecca? What does it say about Rebecca?
She's too easy.
She's too easy? Okay, Pamela, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, well, I was thinking two things. First, that she could be potentially extremely naive and sheltered and not really realizing that there could be danger, but also she's really independent and strong. And she's like, I don't need to ask my dad that. I want to do it, so it's going to happen. Done. It's like, you know.
Judge of character. I'm a good judge of character. Lori.
I think she,
One second, Lori. Go ahead.
she just strikes me as being very naive. I would agree with that, but also very, very trusting and very kind. So, and I also think it probably in the background, she knows that if a stranger asks to spend the night at her home, her father would approve.
That law of hospitality in the
right.
And also, I just want to point out, which I never thought of before, because every time I read the Torah, I see something else. Her great-grandfather was named Nahor, and the town is named Nahor.
Mm-hmm.
So they're big shots in the town. You know, when you're like, the town is named Rothschild, and you're a Rothschild, I mean, you know, so she's the daughter of the biggest, most prominent family possibly in the town because it's named for them, for her great-grandfather. So she has, I like what I think, I agree with Pamela. I think she was independent. I think she felt powerful, you know, and I think she maybe thought she had a good judge of character, or maybe it was their tradition when you see a stranger come in. Don't forget, he had 10 camels. And they were all filled with gold and riches and jewelry and everything else. So she's already seeing, oh, this guy is not some beggar. He's like, he's quite wealthy. We're wealthy, you know, or whatever. Miriam.
Yes, I think what everybody said is true and validated, but she was very trusting, seemed like a sweet, naive, but rather strong person. And later, she's the opposite of this. She's manipulating. She wants her son Jacob to have the blessing from Isaac. She does not at all want Esau to have it. And she's kind of standing and puppeteering everything that's going to happen and pulling the strings. And I guess she's punished for it because I don't know if Jacob ever sees her again. He runs away because, and also Esau leaves. But here she is, very kind, and kindness was what I think Abraham wanted from his future daughter-in-law above anything else, that she be kind and feed not only Elazar, but all his. So then later we see a change of personality.
Well, we see a change, but I don't know if I'm teaching that, but I don't totally agree with you, because she did have a message from God that who was supposed to be the heir, but I don't want to go there right now. Right now, we're seeing that she's strong and independent, a young girl, and she brings him home. And immediately, Eliezer, or the servant, because he's not called that yet, he bows to her, thanking her, and he says, he thanks God. She goes, oh, wait a minute. You know what? We skipped something very important. After she finished, this could be another reason she said you could come over, I realized. Before he asks, after she finishes watering the camels, the man took a gold nose ring weighing half a shekel and 2 gold bands for her arms, 10 shekels in weight. He gave her solid gold jewelry. Now, by the way, I have to tell you something funny. I'm on a sort of a listserv or a group of women, Jewish women clergy. And about a year ago, there was this huge discussion among some cantors, women cantors, about nose rings, about nose jewelry, and how they were getting pressure from the temple or their community or their congregation. What do you think? And what do you think about wearing nose jewelry? And they were all talking about, Rebecca wore it. Look here. This is the quote that they justified it. Rebecca was wearing a nose ring. It's very Jewish to wear a nose ring. Anyway, so he gave her all this gold, and then he said, anywhere, any place, any hope I can stay with you? And she said, oh yeah, come on over. So it could have been both of that. I knew that happened because it says here, the maiden ran and told all this to her mother's household. Now, Rebecca had a brother whose name was Lavan or Laban. And Laban ran out to the man at the spring. And when he saw the nose ring and the bands on his sister's arms, when he heard his sister say, thus the man spoke to me, he went up and who was still to the man still standing by the spring and said, oh, why do you remain outside? Come on in. What are you waiting for? Come on in. So, we know later that Laban was an extremely greedy guy, and it was really the gold that made him, invite this man in. So then we go, the man entered the house and the camels were unloaded and given food, and they bathed the feet and the feet of the men with him. So, and Brad, in terms of the hospitality idea, when guests came to your house, and we know Abraham bathed the feet of the men who were angels when they came to the tent. And then he tells the whole story. My master is Abraham. He sent me here. I said, what should I do if she doesn't want to come? And then I asked God for someone to water my camels, and Rebecca did it. He basically recaps everything that happened. It's like interesting that the narrative, because the Torah doesn't usually review things, but it goes over the whole story again. Wait, hold on. Oh, this is too far down. And okay, hold on. Am I love my son? Will you follow me? Wait, how did this happen? Oh yeah, she said, I never thought we'd get this far. Let me drink water from your jar. And I did. Okay, so here, I skipped this because I knew I was just going to recap it for you. And now, if you mean to treat my master with true kindness, tell me, and if not, tell me also. Let me take her back as a wife. And tell me, don't tell me yes or no. Don't make me like be confused, go right or left. I don't know what's happening. Tell me. And they say, the matter was decreed by the Lord. We cannot speak to you, good or bad. Yes. And here's Rebecca, let her be a wife. So they do betroth her. And Rebecca, as is the custom, has no say. However, and then they bring her out and they give her gold and presents and clothing, and they give it to the brother and the mother, and everybody's like, oh my God, this is a very rich shidduch. And they eat and drink and they spend the night. And in the morning, he says, I want to go back. Let me go back. And then they say, let the maiden stay with us for 10 days. And he says, please don't let me delay me. And this is what I like. And they said, let us call the girl and ask for her reply. So again, we have this, they made a betrothal, but do you want to stay with your mother and, family for 10 days? Because you're never going to see you again. And what does she say? I'm out of here. Let's go. So we see that she's but they asked her, you know what I mean? Again, I think this is a symbol of something about Rebecca. They didn't just tell her, you're staying for 10 days. Let's ask the girl. Maybe they were hoping she would, say, I want to stay with my mother. I don't want to leave. But she seems like almost a warrior woman, something very strong about her. I'm ready to go to a foreign land, never see you again, marry a man I've never met, because, and go off on this adventure. And Susan, did you want to say something?
Oh, I always thought that this was new to me in that they betrothed her before they asked her, do you want to go? I always thought that they said, okay, we'll make some arrangements, but we've got to ask her like for final approval. And one thing in answer to the future, I see Rebecca's personality is consistent. Miriam brought up this point, which was a good one, but I think that it's consistent with what she later was, because she's strong here and she knows what she's doing. And even when she has her son disguise himself, Jacob, to her husband, she's in charge. And I think she's in charge throughout. And I think this personality is very consistent.
I want to, yes, 1 second, Pam. I just want to say to you, even though they agreed to the betrothal, the fact that they said, do you want to go later? The rabbis and the Talmud say, from this we learn you cannot force a girl to marry someone she does not want to marry, which is pretty rare in the ancient world, or even like 100 years ago or 50 years ago in some places, or even maybe today. If they said, will you go? And she said, yes. But if she had said, no, I'm not. The rabbis say, we learn from this, you cannot force a daughter to marry. Pamela.
I was thinking of the parallel between what can happen probably more in Christian families, but where, even when two people are dating, when the intended actually goes to the father and says, can I ask your daughter for her hand in marriage? So you get the parents' permission, and then you go and you propose to the daughter. And I almost feel like you could trace it back to this moment.
I think you're right. I think also all over the ancient world, the daughters were property, basically. And that's why Rebecca's kind of rare in this situation. The daughters are property, and the men, one of my hobbies is the Tudors. The whole England is Elizabethan time. And they're just marrying off their daughters. I mean, they marry them off to old, disgusting kings and rich men, and the girls have no say, and they marry them off when they're 12, and they have absolutely no say. And here in the Torah, they're asking her. So, yes, did you want to say one more thing, Pam?
I just had one more thought about the sort of marrying off, which is, I think I probably read this in like Elizabeth Gilbert's book about Committed, but where they talk about how historically, the only way you could have treaties and mergers that were solid or by marrying intermarriage between regimes, the French and the Germans and the Spanish and so forth and so on. So it's sort of an extension of that because there weren't no such thing as like a corporation.
No, I mean, King Solomon married, hundreds of women, daughters of different countries to make treaties. And his favorite was Pharaoh's daughter, in fact, but you're absolutely right. Daughters were used as bargaining chips for peace treaties and political means. And that's even more interesting that they said to Rebecca, will you go? Yes.
Rebecca may have figured, hey, it's not going to get any better than this. Even if I don't like the guy, at least I'll have an easy life. I'll have gold servants and stuff like that. So that may have been part of her motivation to say, yeah, I'm ready. I'll go.
Possibly. Absolutely. Merle.
Were there dowries then?
Absolutely.
So dowry to me always represented a bargaining chip. And that's what struck when you said that they were like bargaining chips, that, what's in it? What am I going to get from marrying her or marrying her off in either direction?
Right. Well, in this case, it was, they gave gifts to get the girl because Abraham wanted a very specific, desirable someone from his family.
Well, you want to know what she's coming with for you. That's the bargaining chip.
I know. I don't know that we don't have any information about that. Okay. We don't have a lot of time. So I just want to get to. Okay. Sure. Okay. So will you go with this man? I will. And Abraham, and here we are. So they sent off their sister Rebecca and her nurse. So her nurse came along with Abraham's servant and his men. So young women always had a servant or a nurse or someone with them. And I did not know this till I read this today. And they blessed Rebecca and said to her, "O sister, may you grow into thousands of myriads. May your offspring seize the gates of your foes." And apparently in Orthodox weddings, this is what they say to the bride at the bedekin right before they put the veil on her. This is the blessing they say to the bride, that may you grow, you have like thousands of children, and may they defend, all of us. Okay, so here's really interesting. So then Rebecca and her maids arose. So she didn't just have a nurse, she had some servants, mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebecca and went his way. This is really interesting. And I guess we're only going to get this far. Then Rebecca and her, Isaac had just come back from the vicinity of Be'er Lahai Roi, for he was settled in the region of the Negev. And Isaac went out walking. Others say he meant to meditate in the field toward the evening, and looking up, he saw camels approaching. Raising her eyes, Rebecca saw Isaac. And now in Hebrew, it says she alighted from the camel, but in English, in Hebrew, it's Vatipol me'al hagamal. She fell off the camel. I love that. Did she go, oh my God, who is that, and fall off? I mean, she literally just fell off the camel and said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field toward us?" And the servant said, "That is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. And we'll talk about what does that mean. Then the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. This is the first Isaac hears there was a look, someone was looking for a wife. Then Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he took Rebekah as his wife. Isaac loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death. Such a rich ending to the story. So Isaac is walking out in the field, and she sees him, and she falls off her camel, and she covers. Okay, he's first of all. So this is another thing about Lord Sachs wrote. I thought it was fascinating. He's in the Be'er Lahai Roi. I don't know. I don't think we studied this, but that is where Hagar had her vision of the angels, and she named that place. She's the only one who named a place. She had an encounter with God when he said, go back to Sarah, and she names the place. This is it, where I was seen, where God saw me. So the Midrash says that Isaac went looking for Hagar because his father was alone and old and said, go back and marry my father now. And the part that we're not going to get to is that Abraham took another wife and they called her Keturah, but the rabbis say Keturah was Hagar, even though, and he had like 8 more children or 7 more children with Keturah. So this was interesting that he was making peace with Ishmael. He was making peace with his father. He was sending Hagar to his father to marry. I mean, it's all midrash, so, but the fact that he's in the place where Hagar lived or stayed or had a vision is significant, I think. And I don't find any note. I never saw it anywhere but Lord Sachs. And then he sees Rebecca, and he hears that his father did this for him. And then it says he took her into the tent as a wife and he loved her. It's not like he loved her and took her in as a wife. Yes, Susan, did you want to say something?
Yes, I'm so glad you said that because I never knew that you related to Hagar, but we read about Hagar just a while ago, and it was like God sees me.
Right.
And I wouldn't have noted it like, I love this interpretation of getting Hagar for his father, but rather it's a place where his eyes are opened as well. I mean, Hagar's eyes were opened for God. His eyes are opened and he sees Rebecca too, because also, and then he knows that this is going to be his bride or his wife. And that opening of eyes where you can see, beyond your immediate issues. And I think this is the most beautiful passage in the Torah, where he takes her into the wife and he loves her. And
takes her into his mother's tent. And the Midrash says that when Sarah was in her tent, there was a Shekhinah above the tent. And when she died, it disappeared. And the Shekhinah is like the feminine divine presence. And when Rebecca entered the tent and lived in the tent, the Shekhinah came back. So she enriched his life. And, it's time to stop, but eyes are a big thing because Isaac goes blind later. So, I mean, just keep that in mind, this theme of seeing and not seeing, and what it means, seeing with your eyes and seeing with your wisdom or your intuition or whatever your understanding. So any questions or comments? Yes, Miriam?
I have one.
This year, I seem to be paying attention to something that I did not do before. And that is, he is sending Eliezer to his family. In other words, he does not want one of the daughters of the town, even though she's Jewish. He wants his family, something that many, many years later in our centuries, we kept away from. We did not want family marriages between first cousins. I mean, between brother and sister, of course, that's incestuous, but certainly not with first cousins. And yet my mother's mother and my mother's father were first cousins, and 5 very brilliant children ensued from it with no maladies. And yet, I know that first cousin marriages are discouraged even today.
Yeah, that's true. But in those times, I think marrying into the family, at least you knew who you were. Lorraine.
I know that we're at the very end. I wanted to maybe know a little bit about the probability of Keturah being Hagar, because didn't Ishmael was already a teenager when Isaac was weaned, and then we're talking about Isaac now being of marrying age. So I gather that he is a young adult, and then we're talking about Keturah having 6 children after marrying Abraham. So on this, given if we're talking about the same person, we're probably saying that Hagar was maybe an older woman also having children in the what will be like it's similar to a miracle, right? Like Sarah.
You know,
Right.
Keturah had children, and then Ishmael had children too, because we follow that, and he had 12 sons that they had 12 tribes also. Like the Israelites, there were 12 tribes of Israel, but there were 12 tribes of Ishmael. Unfortunately, go look to Chayei Sara, because this is the end of the text that we didn't reach today. They believe that, and anyway, if Sarah could give birth at 90, boy, and you can't take it literally, but just actually, absolutely literally, I don't know if we take it, but this idea that he did remarry. And I also want to end with this, because he fulfilled it by owning some land for the first time. He fulfilled it by getting his son a wife, but then he felt like he still needed more offspring, perhaps. And so he married and had more offspring, because we were all, he was trying to make the prophecies or the blessings happen. And so I think what we can understand from this, in this interpretation, that we are partially responsible for bringing blessings into our lives, that we can't just sit around and wait for them, that we can take action and bring blessings into our lives by doing that. So I wish you beautiful blessings for the week, and Shabbat Shalom. And it was such a pleasure to study with you, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is great.
Shabbat shalom.